Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're so glad you could join us. I'm Ellen. I'm part of the team here at Navigate, and I'll be your tech support person during the session. Before we jump in, I'll quickly run through a few housekeeping items. I'll just let everyone know that the session is being recorded. We'll ask that everyone please keep your mics muted and your cameras turned off to keep background noise and distractions to a minimum during the presentation. If at any point during the session you run into technical problems, please feel free to send me a direct message in the chat and I'll be happy to help you out. If you have a question during the presentation, you can send it at any point in the chat. We'll have time for conversation at the end of the presentation and we'll cover any questions from the chat at that point. If you'd like to join the conversation, please use the reaction function at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute yourself. And now I'll hand things over to Maureen.
Thanks, Ellen. Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're super excited to be having this conversation today. I'm Maureen. I'm the co-founder of Navigate Food Safety with my partner, Alex Hanley, who you may have met during the last webinar. What we're shooting for today is a conversation around a scenario we see playing out in many plants, the challenge of getting everyone to play their part in food safety and sharing the load. Now, everybody thinks they're the only ones who are messy under the hood. That's not true. This is a challenge for the majority of plants that we've been in. And there's a good reason why culture is a hot topic in the industry. So you're not alone. Let me preface the presentation with this. Teams who share the load are deliberate about how they make that happen. And it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. It's not complicated, but you have to work at it and you have to deliberately set people up for success. And what I can say, having worked with teams and plants and seen them going through change, is that performing as a team is addictive. And people who feel they're part of a team are happier at work, they do better work, and they're more likely to stay with their team. And I probably don't need to tell you that retention is one of the major industries facing the industry, or major issues facing the industry right now. So we believe so strongly in the importance of sharing the load that it was actually the very first online training we ever created at Navigate on teamwork. So for now, I'm going to turn you over to Alex. I hope to see some great participation in the polls and some participation when we open up for discussion. Over to you, Alex.
Excellent. Thank you, Maureen. Hi, everybody. So everybody heard it before, food safety is everybody's responsibility. What are we saying when we say that? Well, we all know that we all have the potential to bring to create a lot of damage, to bring the whole team down every day by being careless, by botching our work, by shedding hair, by dropping our pen in the soup or our safety goggles in the soup. So everybody agrees that everybody needs to do their part, but just saying that can be a little bit simplistic. The problem is not so much in what we're saying as in what we are not saying. Because when everybody is responsible, then nobody is responsible. Big statements often hide the fact that there's nothing really solid to back them up, nothing to hold people accountable to. If I haven't dropped my pen in the soup or I didn't drop my safety goggles in the soup, do I get a pass? Have I been responsible? Have I done enough? I mean, the notion that everybody is responsible is certainly beats the notion that everybody is not responsible for food safety, that we can do whatever we want. We don't need to pay too much attention or to worry too much about anything because you know what? We have a quality team and they are the ones who are responsible for food safety. They do a mighty good job, so we don't need to worry about it. Bottom line is everybody is responsible. It's a great vision, but without tactical and practical side to it, a great vision is not a whole lot better than no vision at all. The thing about, a lot of people have good intentions, but they don't know how to make all their business imperatives work together. They don't know how to fit food safety with all the other business imperatives. And unfortunately, food safety often pays the price because there's really no workbook on how to make everybody be responsible for food safety, how to be ready every day. And when people don't know how to do something, questioning their commitment or their intentions, it's not always super productive. We could say, maybe people are thoughtless, but better yet, we can help them figure it out. So it's important to start with a good vision where everybody has to do their part And the challenge will be in giving life to that vision, in taking it from a statement on a piece of paper and translating that big aspiration into real actions that are going to make the difference in the plant. So this is going to be our agenda today. First, I'll talk a little bit about the situation, then we'll see what you have to say about the situation in your facilities, and then I'll wrap up the first section. And after that, there'll be another short presentation about the things we can do. Then we'll listen again, and then Maureen will wrap things up on the 45-minute mark. So we're talking about how to be practical and tactical in working together on food safety. In other words, we're talking about teamwork. So who wants more working in silos? Who hasn't had enough of that already? Who doesn't have enough to do every day without having to hold the ball for everybody else? Sharing the load, it makes it better for everybody. It makes us all better. And for that, dividing the work is going to be key in helping everyone be responsible for food safety. So we're going to start with 5 basic rules to guide us on how to divide the work. And then we'll look at dividing the work more practically. It all starts with clear responsibilities. When we establish clear responsibilities, it allows us to hold people accountable. Without clear responsibilities, we set ourselves up for failure. It's just that simple. So clear means that people understand. It's straight and to the point. It's written in a language that the operators or the associates understand. It's not super technical. It's not overwhelming. So if you copy and paste standards into your programs, that's not clear. That's overwhelming. In most cases, SOPs, they're often not clear. They're often overwhelming. The second piece is clear responsibilities allows us to hold people accountable, but at this point, it's just potential. Without feedback, without enforcement, we're not much farther ahead. It's still hit and miss. So some people choose to follow the rules because they like following rules or because they can see the value, but other people, they will just choose not to follow the rules just because they can. They never wash their hands unless you tell them to. They leave a trail of clutter everywhere they go. So the rules need to be enforced. Enforcing keeps the system together. The work must be organized so that each person is responsible for the consequences of their own actions. That's what we mean by coherence. So an example of that would be, there can't be a way for me to simply shove the things that I don't want to do onto your plate. If I'm allowed to clean my desk by pushing everything on the floor, and then it's your job to come and clean the floor, it's not fair. It's frustrating, it's counterproductive. Nothing ever really gets done that way. So responsibilities and the reward system have to be coherent with each other. Then we must align the responsibility with authority. When we pile up responsibilities on people who don't have the authority to make things happen, we usually end up with a yapping terrier with a muzzle, without a muzzle. At the same time, somewhere else, someone with the power to get things done is not held accountable. So it's not really a good setup. We owe people the means to deliver on their responsibilities. So ensure that everyone has agency, has the means to do their job. It can't be all bark and no bite. And then finally, we have to align the work with natural roles. We have to take the time to figure out what each group or what each person's natural role is, and then divide the work along those lines. If you cater to people's strength, you set them up for success. So managers manage, supervisors supervise. Maintenance is responsible for all things maintenance. The packaging crew is responsible for all things packaging, and so on and so forth. It sounds very simple, but as soon as we start digging, as soon as we start scratching the surface, we'll see inconsistencies. I'll give you an example. The glass inventory. The glass inventory has to do with equipment and building condition. And equipment and building condition is normally the responsibility of maintenance. But how often does it fall on food safety, on qualities list because it's a food safety task? That's just one example. We'll talk about a better example in a minute. But now to illustrate how these 5 basic rules work in real life, let's look at an org chart. Okay, so the reason we're looking at this is because it shows how power flows in the organization. Power flows down from top to bottom. It's the job of the people above to make the people below comply. It's that simple. So basically, we've got the production crew here and the packaging crew here, and they are the bulk of the people in the plant. And they also have supervisors whose job is to enforce all the rules, the safety rules, productivity, waste control, HR, and so on and so forth, including food safety. Then we've got managers who are there to make sure that the supervisors are doing their job. They're enforcing the rules, amongst other things. Then we have the plant manager who's there to enforce everything, to make sure that everything's running smoothly. And so enforcement should follow these same lines. But what often happens in terms of food safety, and we see it very often with the GMPs, is that the company relies on the quality manager way over there to enforce the rules with these people way over here. And guess what? It just doesn't work. Why does it not work? Well, because the quality manager has absolutely zero power, zero authority, zero authority over most people in the plant. And that becomes a huge cat and mouse game. You know what I mean? It's a constant struggle. People complying when someone from the quality team is watching, but none of the people who should be watching in the first place have half an eye open because they know that somebody else is doing their job. So it's time for that to stop. And so what we mean by that is that when we say everybody is responsible for food safety, what it really means is not only is everyone responsible to follow the rules, but everybody should also be responsible for enforcing the rules. First, by telling each other in a friendly way when they notice a colleague veering off the beaten path. And then supervisors are there to supervise and to enforce all the rules with their teams. And the managers manage, and so they enforce with the supervisors all the way to the top. So we're starting to be practical by emphasizing the importance of accountability. But what are we going to hold people accountable to? How can we give food safety some teeth? Well, we can start with 4 simple expectations, 4 responsibilities. Now, these responsibilities apply to everybody in the plant: production, packaging, maintenance, shipping and receiving. It applies to the operators, the supervisors, the managers. It applies to local or corporate. It applies to visitors and auditors. It applies to everybody. Whether you bake bread, you can peas, you mill flour, if you slaughter chicken, if you make plastic bags, if you fill those bags with milk, or you fill them with chicken pot pies, it really doesn't matter what you do. The rules, they apply to absolutely everybody. And then the first rule is follow the rules, follow the GMPs. Everybody must follow the GMPs. Don't spit in the soup. Don't walk on the line with your dirty boots. The rules are there for a reason. Nobody's coming after you to clean up the mess. Now, for most jobs, there's one way to do it right and about 100 ways to mess it up. So if I'm working on a gearbox, if I spill oil all over while topping it up, or if I don't check the gasket to see if the gasket is in good condition, if it's leaking or if it's seeping while I'm doing the PM, nobody is going to come after me to do my job right. So being responsible for food safety, often it's as simple as being good at the job that I'm doing right now. Now, nobody can be everywhere all the time. We all need to have each other's back. That's what teamwork is. So you should be able to recognize what's normal and what's not normal in your work area. We can all see when things are not clean, when there's clutter, when there's gaps in housekeeping. If the garbage can is overflowing, if it's spilling on the floor, that's not normal. Same way, we should all know that gear oil doesn't belong all over the equipment or all over the floor. And when we see an issue, well, what do? We can pick up a piece of trash, but nobody is going to fix a gearbox on the spot, not even mechanics. So again, it's not my job to clean up the mess because Billy over there was sloppy. That's not what I'm talking about. But everybody can pass the information along to their supervisor or to the appropriate department. In this case, it's the maintenance department, so that they can issue the work order and put it in the queue and fix it at the right time, or so that they can come over and clean up after Billy who made a mess. And with that, I've been talking long enough right now. So there's a little quiz that's coming up. You can just click right on the screen if you want. And once we have that, we'll open it up for to hear what you guys have to say. Hopefully I've stirred this enough to get some reactions. So over to Maureen.
Hey, I'll jump right in there, Alex. And in just a second, I'll get the poll result from Ellen. But I'm assuming that if you're in the room today, then you're not living the dream of everybody doing their part and shouldering their part of the responsibility for food safety. So I think it'd be interesting to hear what you're seeing in your own facilities. Are you seeing what we're talking about, the symptoms of people not sharing the load? Maybe people thinking they're absolved of responsibility, or that quality is going to take care of it as soon as it's a food safety issue involved, it gets shoved off to quality. So here's an interesting story that Alex has told in our at Navigate before, about a facility that got a non-conformance because there was a collection of stuff by the conveyor belt. There was some dust, a piece of belt, a dirty hairnet. It wasn't really about the stuff. It wasn't the content of the collection of stuff. It was about what it represented. Numerous people over a significant period of time had walked by and ignored it. It never made it onto the pre-op checklist. It never got flagged by anybody. So it was easily attended to, but nobody took it on because everybody was responsible, so nobody took responsibility. So I'd be very interested to hear what's showing up in your facility, if anybody has anything they'd like to pop in there. Ellen, how about the poll results?
Yep. Let's see if I can share them with everybody here. So it looks like we had a pretty good split. 22% of people said they found following the rules or the GMPs challenging at their facility. 44% said doing your job right was a challenge. 22% found keep your eyes wide open a challenge. And 44% again found fix it or report it to be a challenge.
Very good. So it sounds like we somewhat hit the mark on that one. Anybody got anything to contribute to that, or do you want to just carry on? I want to make sure everybody's engaged and has a chance. It's a pretty quiet bunch.
It's a little bit quiet. What I can say, like, if I maybe I can say a few words about that story that you had there, and just add to it before continuing. The story was like, what's significant when we find issues is often the number of people that walk by and don't do anything. So in that particular story, it was the story about a plant that looked spectacularly clean, and it looked really good because they had been preparing for an internal audit. And when I got in, the plant it looked really good, but there was that one conveyor where there was a hairnet and some white dust and some black dust and a few things that were on the floor there. And operators would have walked by, and the people who did the pre-op, the people who did sanitation, like, everybody had gone by and not noticed. And then we started digging, and then while we were digging, we found out that there was, in addition to the fact that it hadn't been cleaned, there was some equipment that was falling apart, and it was indicating a whole host of other issues. And the whole point was about how little things can become big things if we don't pay attention to them. So.
Yeah, I think we asked a question one time on how often non-conformance could have been fixed when it was just a small issue. And, it was amazing what came back that could have just been cleaned up long before the audit, or should have been cleaned up anyway by somebody. Anyway, we're quite a bunch, Alex. I think you can just carry on.
I will carry on. So here's what some of the answers that, we talk to a lot of people often. So when we think of people not being responsible, what are some of the factors that lead to people not being responsible? I'm not going to read them all because it's a slide with a lot of ideas. But on the next slide, I have a summary of it. So I'll jump straight to the summary. And what the summary is there's kind of 5 factors that we see most often leading to people not being responsible. Often when things are too complicated, people are less engaged. People are likely to disengage because they don't understand. Also, if it's too theoretical, if the programs say one thing and the reality say another thing, then people tend to be confused, and that leads to some problems. When people don't know how to do the work that's that's also problematic, or why they should be doing the work is also problematic. Often there's a lot of bad habits. Like if for a long time things have been done a certain way, if quality has been holding the ball for a long time, changing to a dynamic where everybody takes a role actively, it can take a little while to do that. And finally, if we're focusing on an external standard, if rather than focusing on what makes food safe in your facility, so if it's all on the GFSI audit, then that leads to basically it leads to the other four issues that we've got there. So next, we're going to look how to move forward with everybody being responsible for food safety. So we looked at those 4 simple rules. They apply to everybody. It's a good step forward. We can start raising the bar in holding the crew accountable right away. And then when supervision buys in, it does make a big difference. It's nice, but it's not an entire program. Now, the reason we summarized the thoughts, like there was to because not just because it's a good educational practice to wrap up nicely the first section, but it's also the starting point of the second section. What we're going to do is we're going to take those 5 big forces and we'll come up with a series of actions to take. So, if the roles and responsibilities are not clear, and when I say clear, like the example that we gave for everybody, we'll give you a few more examples, but that's, those are something that having clear roles and responsibilities is the first thing. Then holding people accountable is number 2. This one is very simple. We know how to do that. We just have to be diligent about it. I mean, after 20 years of auditing and coaching in food safety, I have to say that at least half of the problems that I encounter every day, real ones and, more technical ones, in other words, the real big crisis that companies go through and the non-conformances that are raised during audits, at least half of those problems are directly related to failures to enforce rules that we are fully aware of, but just waiting for somebody else to come and hold us accountable. So that's a big one. Now, if accountability is such a big leverage point, maybe it's time to shift our focus from KPIs like passing an audit or not getting recalls, things that don't really have an impact on what's happening in the plant, to other KPIs that have more impact on behavior in the plant. Maybe we need to start tracking accountability some way or another, for example. So we need to develop ways of working together, specifically around food safety. Now, what do I track? How do I organize the work? Where do I start? Where will I find the good practices when it comes to holding people accountable every day? Well, those are all good questions. And if we don't have the answers right now, well, we're talking about it, but there's always room to learn more. Regardless of all that, in a lot of cases, we need to simplify programs, because if people are confused, that's not good. They're not going to be able to do what they need to do every day. So we need programs that make sense to our people, and we need to focus on what we know really makes the food that we make safe. We need to focus more on what we know is important and less on what we're told to do. And to do that, of course, we need to take our power back. We need to move our focus back to the business, away from the standard. Standards are very important, but they should be there to support us in making food safe. It shouldn't be our beacon. It shouldn't be our primary focus. So how do we do all that? Well, we know high performance teams have a structure to work together, and they have a plan to divide the work. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's no handbook, but I can share a few lessons that we've learned along the way, a few tricks that work for us and for the people we work with. So here's an overview of how we lay out teamwork around food safety. We use the 5 basic rules that we saw in the first section, and we divide the work in 5 functional groups as they relate to food safety. So the first group is everybody. Everybody, that's what we've been talking about: operators, supervisors, visitors, corporate, everybody. We've also talked a little bit about supervisors. They have a big role too. The management team, so that's the top dog, the plant manager, for example, and their direct reports. So the leadership team, if you want. That is the management team together. That's one of the functional group. Upper management, so that would be the plant manager or the CEO or the owner, whoever is at the top. That person has special responsibilities of their own that are very important for food safety, obviously, including setting up KPIs, which is going to be giving the direction to the whole food safety programs. And finally, we have a food safety team leader. That's usually the quality manager. Now, we don't have corporate on this graph here. We've kept this framework for the plant level. Of course, in a corporate organization, the corporate team definitely has a big role to play. But we'll go into detail, into detail as to how it works, just the most simple program if you want. So those are 5 functional groups at the plant level, and we're going to go through them one at a time. So we already talked about everybody. Everybody needs to follow the rules, do their job right, keep their eyes wide open, and when they see something, they need to fix it or to report it. Then supervisors play a big role because they're responsible for making sure that the expectations that are set out by management are understood and followed by operators. They build the team's capacity, they hold their crew accountable. So they're in charge of day-to-day oversight, of troubleshooting, of communication. They're also in charge of ensuring that their area is up to snuff, so that it's clean, that there's, that there's no food safety hazards in their work area, that everything's being taken care of. They're there to ensure that their teams perform, that the team knows how to do their jobs well, and they are indeed doing their jobs well. And they're also in charge of ensuring that their team's paperwork is complete and matches reality. So that's a lot of responsibilities. And I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of those responsibilities often fall on quality. Now, if anybody in the plant owns food safety, it's the management team. So the management team, so the leadership team, they manage everything as a team. Yeah, so they manage health and safety and productivity and waste control and this and that. And they also manage food safety as a team. Each manager on the team also holds a very important part of the plant operations. If they didn't, they wouldn't be on that leadership team. So each one is very likely to have a very big impact on food safety, on some aspect of food safety by the programs that they hold. The maintenance manager has a huge impact on food safety. The sanitation manager, the procurement or the shipping and receiving manager would also have a big impact, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, they enforce the rules. They verify implementation of the program during monthly inspections. They resolve problems in their area of responsibility. So there's a lot that they do together, basically. Then we have upper management. So upper management is the person that has ultimate power in the plant. They make all the big decisions. So they make the plan. In other words, they set the direction, again, the KPI. Once that's done, or the KPI and the policy and all that. And once that's done, they make sure that we stay on course. And that's why they need to be updated regularly on what's working and what's not working. Because if something's not working, they are the ones who are going to get the programs back on track by allocating resources when the ship is going off course. And of course, if we get into trouble, they're the ones that are at the helm ultimately in sticky situations. So it's their job to get us out of trouble. And now we kept the food safety team leader last. Before to introduce the food safety team leader, I want to share a quote from a book. It's Animal Farm by George Orwell. And there's a line in that book that illustrates really well how the best laid plans can go awry. And I always think about that line when I think of the line, everybody is responsible for food safety, because I often, it seems to be the exact same general idea, the exact same mistake. Everybody is responsible, but some of us are more responsible. I mean, in Animal Farm, the group was more equal, ends up with all the privileges. They lived a good life. It's not really the same thing in food safety. Being more responsible just means getting a bigger share of the workload. So I said, when I say the food safety team leader, you can think of the quality manager. And And then what we think of is, you know, we often say, oh, it's their audit, it's their food safety plan, it's their KPI, their paperwork. So the fingers are pointing. It's their problem to understand, you know, we do the work for them and for their auditor and so on and so forth. You know, it's their job to keep everybody in line, to remind us of what we're supposed to do. And, you know, whenever there's a chink in the armor, well, basically it's their fault. So obviously it's not the vision any of us is looking for. We can contrast that vision of the food safety leader with the food safety leaders or the quality managers' natural role. So if their role is not to be responsible for doing all the work, what that could possibly have an impact on food safety, because basically everything that happens in the plant can have an impact on food safety. If it's not that, then what's their role? So the first role is to monitor and to report. You know, what does it mean in the everyday? Well, you know, they look at the status of the different programs and they report that to upper management, whose role is to ensure that the whole ship is going on course. And to so reporting to upper management is one of the roles. The second, they coordinate work around food safety. So they'll facilitate meetings, they'll compile reports, they'll plan activities. This is part of how they support the whole team. Third, they will support the team by handling some of the programs. They take on a bit of the drudgery so the rest of the team can focus on their own areas of expertise. Things like document control or HACCP or verification and validation, regulatory review. These would be programs that the food safety leader might be handling. Now, what I see in a lot of plants is that the food safety leader would be holding a lot more than that. And that's the difference. They hold some programs, but by no means do they hold everything. And then finally, they find answers. You know, they support the rest of the team by being the specialist in food safety. They should be the source of knowledge around food safety, or at least they should be able to find the questions. So that's a far cry from making sure that everybody is wearing a hairnet or everybody is washing their hands and nobody's chewing candies and the glass inventory is filled out at the right frequency, isn't it? And now finally, just to finish, when I say they monitor, you know, you could say they verify. Are they there to verify that operators are following the rules? Because that's what I see, or that's what we see in most cases. Quality spends a lot of time verifying what's happening on the floor, and that's part of the job, but it's not the whole job. You know, it's not the whole task. It's not even the most important part of the task. They can verify if operators are performing on the 4 expectations that we looked at, but they should also verify that the supervisors are enforcing the rules, that the supervisors are monitoring their crews on all those expectations. Because in a way, that is a lot more important than monitoring the operators. They don't have the time or the resources to monitor the operators. And then they can verify that the managers are holding their supervisors accountable to enforce those rules. Now, that's really important. And then finally, they can verify that the plant manager is holding their managers accountable. Now, when that happens, now we're really talking. That's some serious verification. And on that note, that's it for the presentation. We'll see if there have been any questions or comments.
Hey, Alex. Yeah, we've had a few comments. I will just pop through a couple of them, and if anybody wants to jump in, they can. I think one of the best comments we just had was that the quality department sometimes is seen as insurance. They pay for it and they don't need to follow the rules, but they hold them accountable when they run into a problem.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, I mean, that's what we see. That's one vision of quality. It's a very common vision of quality, where there's a big difference between, or there's kind of a big, not a difference, but there's a big kind of game between quality is perceived as stopping the facility from making cases, from putting product on the shelves. And it's true that the business, as a business, it's the business goal to put product on the shelf. Every company has got to make product, and every company has got to bring product to market, and that's what pays the bills. So it's the number one priority. Whatever we say, cash is king. So it's true that it's very important to put product on the shelves. But and what often happens is that leads to a conflict between production, who wants to be putting more product on the shelf faster and meet the customer demands, and quality, who is sort of being held at, who's being tasked in catching when production is releasing product, or not releasing product, but is making product that is not compliant. And what we want to change the vision from that, because we believe that leads to a lot of problem, and we see it in a lot of, we see it's rampant in the industry. And where we want to go is where production is responsible for making product, but they are responsible for making product that meets the spec, that meets customer expectations. And they're responsible for ensuring that the product meets customer expectation. And, first of all, operators would be responsible for that, and supervisors would be responsible for verifying that. And then quality can come over and double check that the work is actually in compliance, rather than being there to catch catch people who are not following the rules. If I give an example, it's true for production. It would be true for maintenance in the same way. I use the example of the dirty boots on the conveyor, but that's not, I'd be curious to know, and I understand if people don't want to say in a public, seminar, oh, me, but I'd be curious to know if I'm the only one who's seen that, or if others have. I mean, I've talked with enough people over the years to know that these things happen. Well, I've seen them happen myself, so I know they happen. But I'd be curious to see what exactly, like in terms of holding contractors accountable. I have a hard, it is a rampant problem in the industry, and the contractor has as much, there's a lot of risk involved with contractors if quality can't hold the contractors accountable. And even it's hard for even operations to hold contractors accountable. But certainly in terms of everybody doing their job, it becomes really difficult without that accountability piece there. So
I've got another comment, Alex, and honestly, anybody in the room right now, if you have, what we really want to hear, did anything stick? Was there anything new in there that you thought might work? Are these good ideas? Do they seem like they would work from your perspective, or do you have something else you'd like to unpack? So feel free to jump in. I think Ellen has to unmute you if you want, but if you know how to use the chat function on the bottom, just jump in there and I'll see you. We do have another one. Sorry, I'm just going to go back up here. Do you consider that a possible issue, the issue with lack of accountability could have something to do with a lack of comprehension and maybe a lack of training?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. And that's why I said, like we emphasize two of the big factors that were on that, like on those 5 factors when I made this summary. One of the factor was simplifying, because when things are complicated, people don't understand. If people don't understand, then they're not going to buy in. And if they don't buy in, you can't hold people accountable to things they don't understand or to things they haven't bought in. If they haven't bought in, then they're going to do it while people are watching, or they're going to do it when everything is working well. Because it's one thing to follow the rules when on a good day, But we also have to follow the rules on a bad day when there's that last minute order that just came in, and we've got to, we've got to crank up, the line and go at full capacity and go faster. And like then that's when people start cutting corners. So if people don't understand, if it's, here I have, it's too complicated. So that speaks directly to people not understanding. How do I do that? If people don't know how to do it, if it's a lot harder to be in compliance than it is, or if it's a lot harder to do the right thing than it is to cut corners, people are going to cut corners. I mean, ideally, we would design the responsibilities, and that's why we're talking about aligning responsibilities with natural roles, because if I get back to the example of a maintenance department, it's not very difficult for me to explain to a maintenance manager that a condition inspection is part of a good maintenance program, a good PM program. There's some of the tasks that they do is just going and inspecting the line for the condition of the building. It's not a very hard sell. Once people start understanding how the requirement fits in what they're doing anyways, it's really easy for them to do it. But if we present it in a way that doesn't make sense, then it becomes really complicated. It's one thing to tell operators every day when you're using a tool, you've got to make sure that the tool is in good condition. If a plastic shovel is full of burrs and there's the pieces that are going to fall in, that could fall in the product, you've got to inspect it, and you can't use a shovel like that. It's really easy to explain that to operators. It's really, the most common reaction is going to be, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the next time they see a shovel that's not in good condition or a knife that's not in good condition, then they're going to buy in, and they're usually very happy. Like the vast majority, like you've said, the vast majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people, once they know what they can do to contribute, they're gonna buy in, because it is addictive. It's the word you use at the beginning.
Alex, I have another, we'll just take one more.
Yeah, go ahead, because we're getting close to.
We've got about a minute before we wrap up. So here's a comment. There are some people who say all the right words and they promise to do the job, but they don't deliver on the results. They want the title, they want the role, but when it comes to being responsible for the actual work, they're dodging. Well, I would assume that's responsibility.
So what I will say to that is, when we look at, like, one of the things that we're not talking about today, but we're going to talk about in other webinars is, and we certainly talk about that in our training, is it's one thing to have every program, there's a container. So every program, and if you read the standard, if people are too focused on standards, happens, like, it leads to the problem you're describing, where people are, they're saying the right thing, but they're not delivering on the goods. So the standard is going to tell you how to structure a program. It's going to talk about the container, but it doesn't really focus on the content, on whether the program delivers the outcome it's supposed to deliver. Now, every standard says that you need to validate, that your programs are working. And in theory, people should be saying, okay, well, if I have a pest control program, how does a pest control program that perform, what does it look like? What are the indicators that my pest control program is working or not? What are the indicators that my maintenance program is working or not? What are the indicators that my supervision program is working or not? So in theory, we should be doing it. We're not really doing it in actuality, or it's certainly not being enforced by food safety, by external auditors. And if that's the drive for what we do, if we use external audits as the baseline for, when I've achieved something good, then we get to that kind of situation where we're all focused on talking the talk rather than walking the walk. It takes us to key performance indicators, and I'll let you move to the closure, but it might be that it's going to be part of the topic of the next webinar. So I'll let you give me just 2 seconds. I'm just getting to the slide. Oh, go right ahead.
Excellent. Thank you for pitching in with those comments, and it's great to hear discussion. So in the interest of ending on time, we're going to wrap things up for the official 45 minutes. Thanks for coming. For anybody who wants to continue chatting, we're going to hang out here for the 15 minutes or so it'll take to get us to the top of the hour. Feel free to hang out. You can flip on your camera and we can just have an open discussion. For those who are leaving now, at Navigate, we're taking an active approach to resolving issues at the plant, at the corporate level, and within the certification industry itself. We have another webinar coming up on May 4th, a free webinar. What does it really mean to be committed to food safety? We'll unpack how to walk the talk and explore what would KPIs for food safety look like. Ellen's going to drop a link to that in the chat. We'll probably send you an email about it. We're currently working with CPOs and CBs on a refresher training for lead auditors. We have online trainings available, including teamwork, which is largely based on what we talked about today. This is a small intersection of it. And we've got a couple of master classes running. The list is on your screen. So if this is your first time joining us for a webinar, check your inbox afterwards. We'll grant you, for attending today, you'll get a one-time access code to view our everyday food safety training for free. It is not the most complicated or complex training we have, but it's an easy one to consume, and it demonstrates how a good training can drive home an important message to everyone. We also do customized online training. Everything we do is intended to build capacity, and it's light on theory. If you enjoyed the conversation today, please reach out. You can find us at any of these contact touch points. We also have a feedback community. Ellen will drop a link to that in the chat. And all feedback is good feedback. We'll take anything. This is the stuff that gets us out of bed in the morning and gets us excited. What you see as a challenge, we see as an opportunity to bring a solution to make things better.